Manish, this is Joe and Tyson. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Oh, doing good, minus some minor technical difficulties. But we appreciate your time, man, because you've been busy cranking out stories left and right about this whole Sam Darnold situation.
Well, just like you, I'm glad that it's over and we can focus on Darnold playing and not Darnold sitting and waiting and dealing with a lot of that contract nonsense, which I know most fans didn't really care about. They just wanted him in. So that's over and done with, and he's going to be around, hopefully, for a long time. And, I'm excited to see what happens over the next month, that's for sure.
And Manish, did this whole situation catch you by surprise? Because a lot of us kind of expected, like, the Jets' typical fashion where last minute he gets signed, go into camp, and we'd be beyond this. But did this catch you by surprise at all?
No, it did, yeah. It absolutely did, because in this league, just the typical rule is that deadlines spur actions, and when you're dealing with rookie contracts now, because of the slotted rookie wage scale, holdouts for the most part are a thing of the past. Now this new helmet rule has opened up a new pathway for agents to, try to leverage that in the best interest of their client, and that's what you're seeing with Chicago and Roquan Smith. But for the most part, holdouts are not prevalent. They're not nearly as prevalent as they were long ago when players were really fighting for money, real hard money, and millions of dollars. Now it's not about that. It's about offset language, and I'm sure you guys have discussed what offset language is. And when agents don't win that battle, they shift the priority to even more minutia in the contract and guarantees and voided guarantees and what triggers that. And by and large, the player doesn't care. There's a 99.9% chance none of the points that were being haggled over the last 72 hours are ever going to impact Sam Darnold, because you wouldn't anticipate that he would, fail a drug test, and you wouldn't anticipate he would go off the reservation and do something that would be deemed conduct detrimental to the team. But, the agent's got to win his own battles, and that's really why it dragged out. So, yeah, I was surprised. Frankly, I thought at the very least that Darnold would be there for the first padded practice. The first couple practices in shorts, really no different than what these guys did at OTAs in the spring. But the fact that he actually missed a padded practice caught me by surprise. But ultimately, we're talking about 3 practices, only one of them in pads. I think he's going to be caught up, to be honest with you, by the end of the week.
Now, did any of this have to do with the Jets' relationship with Jimmy Sexton, like a contentious relationship, or was that anything behind this, or no?
Well, I know there have been instances in the past that haven't gone Jimmy Sexton's client's way, but what I can tell you is that they did business 3 months ago with Avery Williamson, and a lot of that had to do with the Jets offering more money than anybody else, which made it a no-brainer for Avery Williamson and for Sexton. But what I thought was interesting is that the guarantee void language that Jimmy Sexton was haggling over, fighting over, is supposedly the most important part of this impasse, which it wasn't, but that's what he floated out there. But that exact same provision is in Avery Williamson's contract, and Jimmy Sexton didn't say a word about it 3 months ago when he was dealing with another one of his clients in the Jets. But again, the offset provision was the main negotiating point, and once Baker Mayfield signed his deal with Cleveland, that included offset provisions, that really weakened Jimmy Sexton's leverage for Sam Darnold. And at that point, he pivoted and said, well, that's not the main point. Now the main point of contention is this guarantee void language, when in reality is that if he had the offsets removed from the deal, he would not have brought up the guarantee void language. But agents, they want to get a win in every negotiation, in every deal. The offset provision would have been a tremendous recruiting tool for Sexton moving forward when he's competing against other agents. Next year, for example, he could use that as a way of luring some of the top prospects and say, why don't you sign with me instead of this guy? I can get you, the possibility of a double dip in case things go wrong for you early in your career. And again, once that didn't happen, he went to the guarantee void language. That's not really a recruiting tool, but that's just a little bit of ego involved there for the agent to try to at least extract something away from the negotiation, so it doesn't look like he just got completely beaten on the deal. And again, it's unfortunate because it has nothing to do with the player. The player wants to come in. The team wants the player to come in. The Jets weren't trying to screw Sam Darnold. They want to foster an environment so that he is the face of the franchise for the next decade. So, this was more about ego and the agent's ego and the agent's personal agenda more than what was actually best for Sam Darnold.
And Manish, I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Joe, and for me, I'm a big Sam Darnold guy, love him to death. This whole situation frustrated me a little bit, but I was just kind of wondering exactly how was the holdout resolved? Because there was a lot, like you said, that was floating around out there. There was different reasons. What exactly was the tipping point that just got it all done and got Sam into camp?
Well, the Jets made concessions on the guarantee void language because every deal that the Jets have negotiated, every player on their roster, except for guys who were traded to them. So, for example, most recently, Henry Anderson, his deal was negotiated by the Colts, and Rashard Robinson, his deal was negotiated by the Niners. But every player that was drafted by the Jets or the Jets signed in free agency has this guarantee void provision in it, except now Sam Darnold. So they relented on that. Does it set a bad precedent? It sets a bad precedent. I don't know what the impact will be other than I think every future first-round pick that the Jets have is going to insist now that this language is removed from their contract. In the grand scheme of things, will it matter? In all likelihood, not. But the deal ultimately got done because the Jets made concessions on that end, and they agreed to pay Sam Darnold's $20 million signing bonus within the next 15 days. Typically, what happens is teams, maybe they don't have the cash flow, maybe they don't want to pony up the full signing bonus within 2 weeks. So what they do is they staggered it. They typically give 50%, for example, up front within a couple weeks, and then they'll give the remaining portion a few months later, then whatever's left over a few months after that. So, again, ultimately, is it going to kill the Jets to give Darnold $20 million over the next 15 days versus the next 6 months? Not really. So, they relented on a couple things because ultimately they know what matters most is fostering an environment so he can develop over the course of August so they can fully evaluate him to determine whether he can be the Week 1 starter. That matters much more than some of these contract niceties that were being haggled over. But, in a perfect world, they would have liked to keep things consistent in terms of guarantee void language in their contracts, but, they made an exception for Sam Darnold.
There's a lot of fans out there that were looking at the situation as well and saying if they were Sam and they were a rookie quarterback, they would look at their agent and say, look, just do whatever you got to do. Make sure the deal is done right now so I can get into camp right now. Do you feel that Sam is to blame in any of this?
Well, that's a great point because if you look at the other quarterbacks taken in the first 11 picks, Rosen, Allen, and Baker Mayfield, I can tell you for a fact all three of those guys talked to their representatives and made it clear that they did not want to miss one single practice. Josh Rosen signed first among that group, and the other two guys, Mayfield and Allen, also made it clear that, look, I understand you're fighting for me. I appreciate that, but then when it's deadline time and it's the night before, the day before, a couple days before the first practice, get the deal done because there's no way I'm not going to be on the field. So does Sam Darnold bear a little bit of responsibility in this? Yeah, I think he does, but you also do have to keep in mind he's entrusting his agent. Jimmy Sexton has a long track record, a quarter century of making deals. This guy was making landmark deals with Reggie White back in the day. So you do want to trust him. His family trusted him. I just think they got a little ticked off after practice began, training camp began, and there were only two players in the NFL drafted in 2018 who weren't in camp, one of them being Sam. So I know that by weekend's end, about Sunday mid-afternoon, I had a pretty solid indication that this was going to end fairly soon and that he was not going to miss another practice. And sure enough, about 24 hours later, before the Monday practice, it got ironed out. So, was it his fault? No, I don't want to say it was his fault. Could he have been more assertive? Perhaps. I think that's, you can make a fair case that perhaps he could have been more assertive. But, this is a young guy, a naive guy to a certain extent when it comes to the business of football, and he trusted his agent. And look, like I said, minimal damage done because he missed only a few practices. And, from what I've gathered from speaking to people in the building, I think by the end of the week he's going to kind of be up to speed as if he hadn't missed any practice time at all.
Yeah, I agree. And once again, we're speaking with Manish Mehta, who's kind enough to give us a few minutes, and he was killing it on the cover for this. It was like your social media, man, was like a must-follow for all Jets fans because you always had a great scoop. And now, Sam Darnold practices yesterday. Today, reportedly, he's studying film and trying to get caught up. Do you think that the Jets' plan is to try to see if he can legitimately win the starting job in training camp, or is it kind of like, listen, we're going to start with Josh McCown and go from there?
No, they're going to give him every opportunity in camp and in the preseason, more importantly, to win the job. The blueprint is very similar to what you saw last year, where Josh McCown, if you guys remember, which I'm sure you do, played the first series in that first preseason game. I believe he led him to a scoring drive. I can't remember if it was a touchdown or a field goal. But then at that point, he took a back seat the rest of the first preseason game, didn't play at all in the second or the third preseason game, so that the Jets could evaluate Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg. You're going to get a very similar blueprint this year where you're going to see a heavy dose of Sam Darnold and Teddy Bridgewater. They already know what they have in McCown. He's the safety net option. So if Sam Darnold proves that he is ready to be the Week 1 starter, he's going to be the Week 1 starter. If it looks like he needs more seasoning and, for example, Teddy Bridgewater plays lights out, then I was told that the Jets won't hesitate to start Teddy Bridgewater against Detroit on Monday night. If it looks like neither one of those guys is ready, then, again, they know what they have in Josh McCown, and you would probably see McCown play a little bit in the fourth preseason game, much like you saw last year, and McCown would start off as a Week 1 starter. But the decision will be made after the third preseason game. I think, I know you guys pay close attention to the team, so just watching the preseason games, you'll get a good sense of whether Sam Darnold is picking up what he needs to pick up and whether the team feels confident enough where they can trust him. Because this isn't really – it's funny when you talk about the quarterback competition. It's not really Darnold versus Bridgewater versus McCown. It's really Darnold against Darnold and Darnold competing against time. They're not going to needlessly rush him. But based on everything that I've been told about what they have seen from Sam Darnold over the past several months, specifically in the spring, they knew – they had a good sense of what kind of player he was before drafting him, but then actually getting him in the building, working with him every day in the spring. Based on that information that they have, they think it's realistic that he can be the Week 1 starter. Now, look, he's going to have to prove it in the preseason, and I know it's going up against vanilla defenses, and nothing is a sure thing. Some guys take a little bit longer when the lights come on the big stage, but the indication that I've gotten from people that matter is that they don't think that he's going to be timid or come up small in the preseason. Now, is he going to have his bumps along the road in August? Yeah, I'm sure he will. I'm sure he'll throw a couple picks in a couple of these games, but they want to see how he's understanding the offense. They want to get a grasp on whether he's making the proper decisions, whether it's audibles, checks, things of that nature. And if they feel confident enough where they think they can trust him when the games actually matter, then he's going to be the starter. Because if you're looking at this objectively, there's nothing that Sam Darnold can do over the next 4 weeks that would make him a better quarterback than Josh McCown. Josh McCown is a guy who has had 15 years of experience in the league. He has seen every defense. He understands this particular offense, working with Jeremy Bates in the past, pretty well. And so you wouldn't anticipate that, Darnold would be a better quarterback on September 10th or 10th, I guess, when they open up, than McCown is. It's really about looking at Sam Darnold in a vacuum and asking yourself as a coaching staff, hey, is this guy ready to be an NFL starting quarterback? Can we trust him to help us moving forward? Not necessarily is he better than Josh McCown, because I don't know if he'll be better than Josh McCown all season, to be perfectly honest with you. A healthy Josh McCown has seen a lot and done a lot in the league, so I don't think it's really about that. It's more about evaluating the rookie, by himself and being objective about whether you think he can win football games for you, not whether you think he's better than Josh McCown, because, again, if you look at this objectively, I don't think he's going to be better than Josh McCown in the next 4 weeks.
Another piece of the puzzle that's very interesting is Bridgewater. What is your initial impression of him?
Well, look, the guy is an extremely smart quarterback. I know that from talking to people who used to coach him, people in the building now. He's got a high football IQ. I was very impressed in the spring when I saw his mobility, because I wasn't sure if he'd be, maybe a little hitch in his giddy up. But he's rolling out right, rolling out left. If you didn't know that he had an injury, if he wasn't wearing a knee brace, he hasn't shown any indication in his movement that he was hurt. The big question for Teddy Bridgewater is how will his knee hold up to contact? Because I haven't seen it. I haven't seen him get tackled by an outside linebacker and then get up and shake it off and continue to play at a quality level. So the Jets don't know that as well, but they're cautiously optimistic. You saw a lot of good signs in the spring, but you have to caution that with they're wearing shorts. They've only had 2 padded practices. He's looked spotty, a little shaky to this point. That being said, in the last practice on Monday, he made 2 throws, which just made me kind of say, wow, this guy's an NFL starter. I don't know if he's going to be an NFL starter for the Jets this season. He's clearly not going to be the Jets' long-term answer. But this guy has a skill set. When you add all the intangibles, leadership, football IQ, decision-making, and when you combine that with his physical skill, he wasn't a first-round pick by accident. There's a reason that Minnesota took him at the end of that first round. He is an NFL starter in my mind if he can stay healthy. And I don't know if his knee can hold up in 2018. I think it can. The bigger question from everybody I've spoken to is the concern about what the longevity of his career will be. Will he be healthy enough for 2 to 3 years, or is it going to be 3 to 5 years? He's a young guy. He's 26 years old. So I can't answer that question. I don't think a lot of people can answer that question, but that is a concern for teams around the league, his long-term future in this league. But he's got great skill set. He threw a pass at the end of practice the other day. Pressure coming all over the place. It must have been a second or third read. He threw it to the left corner of the end zone. Nice catch by Lucky Whitehead. And he threw another touch pass earlier in practice. It was right in front of me. And the guy has skills. He's got ability. You would hope that he'd get an opportunity to cultivate his talent in the years to come. So maybe he stays with the Jets. The Jets are open to all possibilities, and I think it's really predicated on what Sam Darnold does in the preseason, because if the Jets feel confident enough in Sam Darnold and another team comes calling for Teddy Bridgewater, they're amenable to trading him. I think you just have to temper your expectations on what kind of compensation you'll get in return, because he is only under contract for 1 year. He'll be an unrestricted free agent in 2019, so you would not anticipate a team giving up a premium draft pick. In a best-case scenario, if they can just get a 4th-round pick for this guy and flip him, it's a $1 million investment that they've had in him to this point. I think they would take him, but again, it's really predicated on how Darnold does. If they're secure with Darnold, they feel good about Darnold, they'll go into the season with Darnold and McCown if another team is interested in Teddy Bridgewater.
Okay, and once again, we're speaking with Manish Mehta. And Manish, the one thing I noticed, this first week of training camp, it seems like this camp is a bit different. Like the vibe is different. It seems like obviously it's a younger team, but it's very positive, very enthusiastic. Is that something that you noticed as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different team. It's a young team. Even the free agents that they drafted, the core free agents that they drafted, Williamson and Spencer Long, Isaiah Crowell, Trumaine Johnson, those guys vary from age 25 to 28, I believe. So, and these are guys who you would hope would continue to grow as this team continues to rebuild. It's not as if they're getting a bunch of guys at the tail end of their career. And then you've got the draft picks, Jamal Adams, Marcus May. You can hear Jamal Adams, all day if you're at practice. And I know you guys were out there. There's a lot of belief that they can do good things moving forward. And I think it's warranted, to be honest with you. I do think that if you're a Jet fan, you should circle 2019 as the year to really consider yourself a viable playoff threat at the beginning of hopefully many years of being a consistent, playoff contender, because you're going to have $80+ million in salary cap space. That's the most in the league next year, in addition to another draft class, in addition to a second-year quarterback who you would hope would gain valuable knowledge and experience playing as a rookie, in addition to the younger guys like May and Adams, and Leonard Williams is still entering his prime. So I think that this team can be competitive this year, be in the playoff conversation for part of the year. I ultimately don't believe they'll be a playoff team because, again, you're going to be dealing with a rookie quarterback for most, if not the entire season, and the rookie quarterback's going to go through ups and downs. And when your rookie quarterback goes through ups and downs, what does that mean? That means your team's going to go through ups and downs. So I do think that they can be part of the conversation for a part of the season, a part of the playoff conversation, I should say, for a part of the season. But ultimately, if they can win 7 games, maybe 8 games, that to me would be a victory. Because if you look, for example, at Philadelphia, Carson Wentz, that's a guy who played like 30 snaps in the preseason, then got hurt, didn't play the preseason at all, started week 1 after the Eagles traded away Sam Bradford, ironically, because Teddy Bridgewater got hurt about a week and a half before the season started, and the Eagles went 7-9 in Wentz's first year. So you saw the jump that Wentz and the Eagles made last year. He didn't finish the season, but he was having an MVP caliber season. And I don't want to say that Sam Darnold is going to be an MVP candidate in 2019, but what I will say is that second year, when you have the real deal at quarterback, that second year, as long as the rookie gets a decent amount of playing time, and Sam Darnold will, whether that's 16 games, 12 games, 10 games, whatever, he's going to get some valuable experience this year. And that's why I think he can hit the ground running in 2019. And when you factor in all these other elements like another 3 or 4 quality free agents, another draft class, and experience for these younger guys who are already on the team, I think 2019 is really the year where Jets fans should expect a legitimate playoff run and probably a playoff appearance. But this year should be fun and entertaining because they're going to build toward that, and I will anticipate that things would really kind of start to take off next season.
Yeah, and before we let you go, the other thing I noticed, too, was the difference between John Morton and Jeremy Bates. And John Morton last year, you always heard him yelling, and he seemed like he was very difficult on the receivers where he was, like, in their face and commanding where the route should be run and all these different things. And Jeremy Bates seems to kind of observe a little more and talk a little more to his quarterbacks and kind of, like, oversees things. What are your initial thoughts on Jeremy Bates so far?
Well, he's an excitable guy. It's funny that you made that comparison. He comes from the Mike Shanahan school. John Morton, more of the John Gruden, Sean Payton school. Now, don't get me wrong. Jeremy Bates worked with John Gruden when he was a young coach as well. He's an excitable guy. He's a great teacher, specifically with quarterbacks, and he's a creative football mind. I know that he fell off the radar for a couple of years, took a break from football. That had nothing to do with his football acumen. He's a sharp guy, a guy who was calling plays for Mike Shanahan at an extremely young age, and he's kind of built in that same Shanahan mold, whether it's Mike or Kyle. You're going to see an interesting combination with him and Rick Dennison, who's also had worked with Mike Shanahan for a long time for all those great Denver teams. You're going to see a consistent running presence, and that was the big missing piece, I think, for John Morton. I thought John Morton included some interesting elements, some smart elements, and when you looked at some of his play designs last year, certainly things that I know Jeremy Bates is going to continue to use, but I think he got away from the run a little bit too much that did not sit well with the head coach, and you're going to see a really solid balance, I think, with the run-pass, and you're going to need that, frankly, when you have a rookie quarterback under center. You don't want to put too much on his plate. So, the running game is going to be his best friend, to be honest with you. So I'll be interested to see how the offensive line holds up. They are implementing a lot of those outside zone runs, stretch runs, things that you saw back in those Denver days with TD and Alandis Gary and, any of those running backs that they seem to plug in that have got, 1,100 yards rushing. So you're going to see a lot of elements of that, and that to me is exciting just as a football fan and as a guy who loves football from the 1990s. I think you'll see elements of that coupled with a lot of new age, cutting edge stuff that Bates is going to employ. It's going to be a fun offense. He's got a quarterback to work with, and I think if Sam Darnold is who the Jets believe that he is, it's going to be really a dynamic offense in the future. I don't think it'll be a dynamic offense this year, but when they get an offensive weapon or two added to the to the stable in the next year, I think it could be a fun offense for a lot of years to come.
Well, Manish, thank you very much for your time. Like I said, your coverage of the whole contract stalemate was phenomenal, and you pulled no punches and you shared great insight. So, thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your coverage, man, because you've been absolutely killing it.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll talk again, but if I don't, enjoy the preseason, and again, I'll be really interested to see how Sam Darnold does in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Oh, we're going to bother you, man. Don't worry.
Anytime, guys.
Thanks, Manish. Have a good night.
All right, take care.